In today's vid podcast, the National Centre for Military Intelligence, I'm actually stood by a very special car that was actually used in one of the James Bond films with Roger Moore. And I'm here to speak to two special guys, father and son, Ingram Murray and Al Murray, and we're going to talk today, sharing the secrets of intelligence. Can I ask you guys, first of all, do we have a license to kill, like James Bond?
Well, the Secret Service has always professed that it did never have.
Yeah, well, it would say that, wouldn't it?
It would say that, of course. But when you think about, they must have bumped a lot of people off in the Second World War. But when you think today, we live in a world of drones, we live in a world with special forces in various parts of the world. We live in a world of airstrikes by the RAF on terrorist establishments, training camps and that sort of thing. And we live in a world of proxy wars. So we have plenty of means to carry out special operations, which is what this question is really about.
Yeah, I mean, the idea that you'd have a license that, I mean, what I always think is quite, that premise in a Bond film is quite, it's the idea that he's stopped by the police, he gets it out and they go, oh right, oh actually it's all right, it doesn't matter, you just shot that guy in broad daylight, it's fine, you've got your license to kill on your way, sir. So, but I always, when I watch a Bond film, I always think of the cover-ups that some poor sod has to do immediately after Bond has done something in central London, you know, or what the newspapers say the next day. That would be the other Bond film I'd quite happily watch. Actually, it's the people M's people who are having to clear up his mess.
And of course, it's a male fantasy, isn't it? Being allowed to kill anybody you like, just like Bond's ability to seduce any woman he liked too.
Yeah.
You know, these were the male fantasies of the 50s.
Oh, I don't know, they're just at the 50s.
Oh.
So do you think this is, I mean, because Fleming has drawn on some of the secret files which have now been released, but do you think there's any similarity between these films and intelligence? Because today we are going to get into the serious side of intelligence in a moment, but I think it is important because when people think of spying, they think of James Bond, don't they?
Well, he's not really a spy, 007,
He's not a
is he?
spy.
He's an assassin, isn't he?
He's an assassin.
He's you know, he tends to be called in at a point where, in the movies, you know, the scene with them is we know something's going on. We want you to go and investigate. What they actually mean is we want you to go and kill someone.
So he's not a real intelligencer.
Well, I don't think he's. I mean, my impression of intelligence is it's people reading my emails,
Okay.
or hacking my phone. You know, rather than necessarily following me or finding. I mean, I don't have an underground lair, so. You know what I mean? I think my impression of intelligence now is that because we live in this world, as Ingram says, we live in this world of proxy wars and drone strikes. We also live in a world of information in a way that, you know, and an abundance of information, and it's everywhere. I mean, each and every one of us is, you know, carrying a source of data, a source of information, a source of intelligence, and also it's got a camera in it, tells you where I am. I mean, in a sense, we all have gadgets 007 couldn't have dreamed of, you know, on us.
Which, of course, is what C, the head of the intelligence service, Secret Intelligence Service, who the first time has recently made a speech, was concerned about when it comes to China.
Oh, this is
China,
Richard Moore, isn't it?
It is
the
Richard
But so we know. I mean, well, here's an
yeah.
interesting thing. We know who C is.
Now,
These people used to just be initials, and did they even exist? And
well, SIS didn't officially exist, did it, until the history came out just a decade or so ago.
Yeah.
So everybody knew it existed.
Yeah, well, because they admitted that headquarters in Vauxhall was there. There's a great big building, and everyone knows who's in the building. But to actually then, you know, confess to its existence is very. I mean, that's interesting in itself. That's I say we're talking an age of information. There's a piece of information that they must have known they couldn't keep secret anymore.
Yeah, so why lift the lid on its secrecy, or is it not it's not totally lifting the lid on the secrecy, is it?
No, of course not, because after all, they're telling us they're telling us what they want us to know, and it could all be a cover story. When he's saying China's the thing we need to look into, it may well be that they're looking into something else altogether. Because
I hadn't thought of that. Yeah.
Maybe Russia's actually he regards Russia as the problem, which is why he's talking about China. He thinks saying China publicly is a thing that he can get away with, and things with China aren't that good anyway. So what does it matter? You don't want to. If you got up and said Russia, that could be provocative after all, and that he's operating in that world if he's acting publicly.
So
Yes.
going back to that speech, because Ingram, you probably got some reflections, having been an intelligencer yourself in your army career. What did you make of his speech, in actual fact?
Well, I think it is a recognition that we are facing multiple threats, and not only what might be called the national establishment, but institutions across the whole area.
Yeah.
Because the way that the electronic business is developing enables countries to make declare undeclared wars and can carry out acts which undermine another country short of physical war, to the point where they can seriously damage the economy, the working of the institutions, and so on. So the threat is much wider than it used to be. Of course, the converse of this is the opportunity that all these electronic bits and pieces enable one to track even the humblest terrorist, because he is carrying a mobile phone, as Alistair's already said, and he has an electronic footprints that you can intercept, find him, and if necessary, hit him with a missile. And that, of course, is what has been going on in Afghanistan. I think also the recent departure from Afghanistan has caused many people to think about where we are going against that sort of threat, the threat of Muslim terrorism, whether it will be encouraged by our over-hasty withdrawal.
And this is
so
summer
on.
of 2021 that this withdrawal,
Indeed.
yeah, very swift,
So,
wasn't it?
Very broad threat.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, although he did also say the rapid collapse in Afghanistan wasn't a failure of intelligence, because a lot of people were saying it was, and he said, it wasn't a failure of intelligence at all. You can't look at it like that. And I think, well, you brought it up, mate.
I'm not sure I agree with him on that.
No, exactly.
Point.
But this is also this is after all the thing is that you can, even with all this data, you can only ever know so much. And I think one of the very interesting things about the Second World War is sort of my area of interest, really.
Yeah.
One of the very interesting things about the Second World War is we have very much told ourselves in the last few decades that the British, I've had people on the internet saying to me, we knew every last movement the Germans were going to make. We knew when we knew when Rommel was going to the toilet, blah blah blah, and as a result, that's why we won. And I think that couldn't be further from the truth, really. It's Bletchley Park, and it's Maverick Geniuses at Bletchley Park, and of course what Bletchley Park is about is the industrialization of code breaking, of cipher breaking. It's not about a chap in the vicarage smoking a pipe having a genius moment, although Bill Tutt pretty much fits that picture when he cracks the Tunny cipher on his own. But industrialization is how you do it. You spend money on it, you expand it, you because you're dealing with giant random numbers, you try and defeat the random numbers with more random numbers, if you see what I mean. But we have told ourselves that that's what we're good at.
But it's not only that, though, is it? Because there's stuff like I've worked on, the human intelligence, which again is industrial scale by the middle of the wartime. Yeah. From prisoners of war, microphones in light fittings, fireplaces, billiard tables.
Yeah, exactly. But even then, with all of this, and like I say, the mythology is built up that we were really good at it. We knew everything that the Germans were going to do. Even then, the last 2 years of the war, the Germans have appreciably lost the Second World War by the middle of 1943. They can never win from that position.
Well, I don't know. I
don't think they can. But the Allies have a misapprehension of why the Germans are still fighting. They've no idea why the Germans are still fighting the last 2 years of the war. Certainly the last year of the war, they've no understanding why they're still going. They don't know, they don't get it, they can't get inside their heads. And so what I'm saying is there's always limits. There's always limits to what you can possibly glean and possibly know. You can know where 2nd Panzer SS are or not, and you can know who's in charge of them, but you don't know why he's doing what he's doing.
But what about in intelligence circles where it is said that as late as February 1945 we could have still lost the Second World War because Germany would have won the tech war, and that ultimately we did win the intelligence game?
I don't think that stands up in the slightest.
Don't?
No, I think the die is cast by 43 technologically, militarily, logistically, operationally, tactically, strategically, on everything. It's just that they won't stop. And by the time Kursk's happened, by the time Hamburg's destroyed, by the time the Battle of the Atlantic's won, it's a matter of time, and you end up with this peculiar thing where you Allied generals thinking that German generals think the way they do because they're generals, whereas they don't understand how tied into the Nazi state their opposite numbers are, and they aren't, because in the end, the intelligence can. What I'm saying is that in the end, the intelligence can only get them so far.
Ooh, I think we might disagree on
good,
this.
Controversial
That's
stuff.
very controversial, isn't it? Yeah, Ingram, come in and.
What is the future of human, do you think? Now, are we able to penetrate the Chinese state to understand how the Chinese state understands, just as we failed to understand how the Nazi state worked at the end of the war, as you've just been mentioning?
Yeah, well, we have a disagreement on that point, but that's
well,
healthy.
That's after all what we're here to do is disagree, I suppose.
But so my question then, because I'm really interested in following this through. After 43, when you think it's really effectively in the bag for the Allies, do you think there's no role for intelligence from 43 until the end of the war?
No, I'm not saying this. I'm not saying there's no role for it, but I just think that it's limited. You can only ever know so much. I mean, the end of the Cold War. I remember I had a tutor, one of the history tutors at Oxford when I was there. He was an Iron Curtain guy. He was an Iron Curtain expert, and the story went that towards the end of 1989, he is writing his basically state of the Iron Curtain book about how the Soviet Pact's good for another 20 years. At least another generation.
Yes.
That Glasnost's going to work out, and that these states are basically have too powerful a grip on their populations, and there ain't going to be no. And then of course the Berlin Wall fell. Yeah. And this tutor, I won't say who he was, but he was regarded very much as a sadist by me and my fellow students. And the glee we all had of seeing his light on in his office through the night for the whole of November, December in 1989, as he went from being an intelligence contemporary person to a historian, literally overnight. That he had to go from this is what we thought, and we were wrong, because there was only, even with the Soviets, and we knew an awful lot about the Soviet Union, as I understand it, by the end of the 80s, and how that even then we didn't really know what was going on.
Well, I'm going to challenge that we can't answer today is to have a look at the bugging operation, because there's intelligence there we pick up from nowhere else, like on the V3, like on the atomic program, that actually I personally believe would have turned the tide of the war if we hadn't discovered it. For all the progress we'd have made militarily.
But they weren't spending the money on the atom program. They didn't have the kit, they didn't have the scientists, the heavy water had been disrupted to the point where they gave up. So
it's interesting because there are different stuff coming out of declassified files. So we'll just kind of leave that. I just think it's interesting, isn't it, that intelligence history is never complete. It's never, any history. Isn't that what we all do?
Well, yes, of course. I mean, for instance, the other day
we're rewriting.
Well, no, absolutely. The other day I was at Hendon, and they got out the bomb damage report document. That's the Blue Book, Volume 1 of the Blue Book.
You mean at RAF
Harris's,
Hendon?
At RAF Hendon. Yeah.
Yes.
Harris's Blue Book, which is this A3 size. Is A3 the big one or the small one? It's A3 book, huge thing with, Cassell, and then a celluloid overlay with drawn on where the bomb damage was, its value as a target, and what the raids were, where they'd gone in, and what damage had been done, and what they were doing, why they were bombing. Like a plain piece of intel right there in front of you. that was used politically. So you'd get the Russian air attaché in and go, look at what we're doing. Look at particularly in 42, 43. Look at what Bomber Command's capable of. Here's your second front. We're doing it anyway.
Because the Russians are having such a rough time.
Because the Russians have such a rough time, and they're saying you're not taking part, and
Yes.
they're not.
We want the second front.
Exactly, and they're not seeing, because after all they're a land power, they aren't thinking in terms of Britain as a maritime power, which is fighting the Battle of the Atlantic at the same time, and campaigns in North Africa, which are very difficult to do because they're all at arm's length. But that book, you look at it and you see, well, okay, but how do they know this about what's been damaged in this town? It's not just photographic reconnaissance. There's some HUMINT, there's some SIGINT.
Back to HUMINT, isn't it?
You know,
That's human.
and all that stuff.
That would be French workers. That would be Polish workers. That, Germany was flooded with foreigners, many of whom had channels to MI6 in Sweden and in Switzerland and places like that. So, the borders in some cases were quite porous, but a lot of information of that sort got back, apart from the bugging operation in the prisoner of war camps in this country. But coming back to the question, do we think there is a role for HUMINT in the future? We can perhaps, in these proxy wars that I was talking about, set one group against another, and because they share certain things, that the relationship between them might be quite porous. So you get information back from one or other of the participants in one of these wars. It's quite an interesting question, because you have a very tight state in China. You have a pretty leaky state in not Soviet Russia, that was a slip of the tongue, wasn't it? But new Russia. And I think it's...
Tsarist Russia, I think we can call it that, can't we?
But you have dissidents. You have dissidents too in Russia, who are very brave people, who will tell you what's going on. And of course you have your embassies and your defense attachés and so on, who will, if they're efficient, have contacts in the establishment and gather information. So that continues to go on, but it has always been a jolly difficult job, because you can be outed and declared non grata.
Expelled for spying. It's quite a popular activity, isn't it?
Yes. Yes.
Well, and anything, but also anything could be spying, can't it? In a way, in an information age, if you get sent an email not intended for you that has something in it that and you pass that on, is that espionage? I don't know, because modes of transmission of data transmission have changed radically, and HUMINT is SIGINT, isn't it, at the moment, because we're all walking signals platforms now. Our relationship with computers has changed. We don't have to go to them anymore. We've got them on us.
In this context, the story of Bellingcat is absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
Here's a layman in his spare time digging up the story of the two Salisbury spies, identifying them,
and the
boss,
Malaysian airliner.
and the Malaysian airline.
Yeah, these are the Russians and the Novichok.
They went to see the
incident.
cathedral. What's wrong with you? Everyone knows that.
The second
Just
tallest spire in
the world.
So Bellingcat had a hand in this, didn't it, in actually exposing who they were, if I've understood that correctly?
Yes, and also which missile launcher shot down MH17, and who was in charge of the crew, and the name of the sergeant, and who gave the orders, just by looking at the internet, and of course the individuals' Facebook pages, and all their electronic messages that they're sending out, probably their Tesco, shopping lists and that sort of thing.
Yes, I mean one of the photos he had is someone posted on Facebook, didn't they? Oh, look, there's a bucket anti-aircraft carrier driving through our village. That's peculiar. Yes. And then there's a picture of it driving back an hour and a half later, or whatever, with one missile less, you know, and he's found these pictures, the Bellingcat people.
Yes.
Is it Elliot Higgins? Is that his name?
Yes, that's his name.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's happening now then in this multi-technological age is that ordinary people are probably even unwittingly becoming sources of intelligence.
Well,
is that what we're saying?
He's like a citizen journalist, isn't he? And doing this, and yes, ordinary people are becoming sources of intelligence. And after all, the blur between journalism and intelligence, you know, journalists, foreign correspondents have always been prime suspects for being for working for the Foreign Office at least, aren't they? You know, so
Yes.
and now we're all, because I mean, it is this transformation of each of us into a sort of source of SIGINT.
I hadn't thought of it
That's
like
human
that.
and SIGINT. We're both, and that there's a merger in lots of ways, and you know.
Well, it's open source, as you would say
Yeah.
now, isn't it?
Open source.
Yes, that's what.
Very, very important, open source information. And the ability to read between the lines, particularly in communist states, where, you know, you have very conventional modes of expression, which, when you read them, know they're covering something up or something like that. But this very much brings us back to C, doesn't it? Asking for, you know, everybody's help in combating the threats, and the threats, the domestic threats, of course. But of course, you've got those in the Middle East, the terrific divide between Sunni and other Muslims.
Yeah, the Shias in particular. Yeah.
Shia Muslims, and also tribal differences, failed states.
In a peculiar way, though, he's asking for people to send in their holiday snaps of the Normandy beaches.
Almost, yes.
You know, that's the thing they asked for in 1943. Wasn't
Yes.
it? They asked for people's pictures of French
Yes.
beaches. It's got that texture to it in a way, isn't it? That the state needs your help.
Yes, and we're all in it.
Yeah, I mean, you wonder if. I mean, the thing is when C gives a lecture, you wonder how many members of the public are paying attention.
Well, Chatham House, you know, is full of journalists.
Yes, but you know what I mean.
Yes.
So the message will spread out, won't it? But I suppose, is it even that people generally in the public are aware that democracy is under threat? And how do we protect that democracy? There must still be an incredible role for military intelligence, for all kinds of intelligence, surely.
Yes, I mean, threats. If you read the Russia report, it analyses quite clearly the threat to our democracy by the Russian state, interfering in elections and that sort of thing.
Fake
So
news?
it's a very precious thing, our democratic, and it's constantly under attack, which is clearly one of the major threats that C and his colleague in MI5, of course, will be thinking about.
But a cynic would say, and this is just to play devil's advocate, he's got to get up and say we're under threat, hasn't he? He's otherwise his great big expensive operation, because I'm assuming GCHQ and all the associated MIs all cost an awful lot of money to run, and everyone's budgets are getting cut. You look at what's happening to the army, where the army's being pared down to the bone.
Yes.
Does that worry you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't know if it worries me, because after all, the services always say they're not being given enough money to spend. So all we ever hear is that they're being reduced to a point of crisis. So they've been saying that since time immemorial, haven't they? So.
But now it's true.
Well, it strikes me that that's definitely. But if the shift is to intelligence warfare anyway, do you need infantry battalions? Which is, you know, and the army went through that use it or lose it thing in Afghanistan, where the head of the army said that we need to use these infantry battalions or lose them. He actually said that out loud, which is an extraordinary thing to do. You know, but to come back to my point, it must be a very expensive business that C is asking us to all pay for, in effect, and so that you could look at it cynically. And he says he needs these threats to justify his existence in a time of tightening budgets, because everyone, you know, we've just spent an awful lot of money on a pandemic, and what goes around will come round, and people are going to get cut across the board. And you know, if you're cynical about defence, you say, well, we've got some Trident submarines under the North Pole, we don't need anything else. You know what I mean? And you don't need all these traditional ways of doing war if we're moving to this sort of future way of doing war. I'm not saying I agree with any of that, but that could easily be an argument on the table.
Could be an argument, yes, definitely.
You know, and also, what on earth could we do about China? Is there? It's also the sort of throw your hands up in the air despair view of this. You know, they own all the dollars in the world. We can't. I mean, the telephones we're talking about are made there. What on earth can we do?
Well, we can. I was going to.
It's a counsel of despair, that though. But
learn the lessons of history. Can we come back to history in the final part of our interview?
Yes.
And shouldn't we be learning lessons of history? And if there's a moment in history, I'm going to ask both of you, what's your favourite intelligence operational moment in history? And it's not confined to the Second World War, but I just thought that might be a rather fun answer.
Well, I'm very. I mean, even though earlier on I was sort of poo-pooing the romance of Bletchley Park, I do find Bill Tutt sitting down with a Tunny code and looking at it until it sort of magically appeared in front of him like a Sudoku. I find that the most extraordinary story that someone on pure sort of brain power and application found a way through this siphon. Obviously, he didn't do it on his own and all that, because after the thing about Bletchley is it's not about people on their own, it is about super integrated teamwork and people playing to their strengths and all that. But I find that more beguiling than someone building a computer to do it for him.
Oh, and they're integrating with other intelligence units.
Yeah.
They're sharing intelligence,
Yeah.
which again is something which I think historically has been lost in the narrative, which is coming back now, isn't it?
Well, yeah,
So
but that's part of the legacy of the way the intelligence community likes to present itself. That everything's siloed. You only know what you need to know. Everyone's hived off from each other, and also they're all rival operations. I mean, the idea that Bletchley is some sort of oracle of Delphi in the intelligence world that can offer gnomic answers to things, when you've got naval intelligence and RAF intelligence and army intelligence all fighting like rats in a sack, and the Prime Minister sticking his oar in, and how helpful Churchill's being, we don't really know, you know, and so on.
You know, they're capturing the public's imagination, and surely that's important, isn't it? That we go back to the roots, to the history, and learn from history. Yes.
Absolutely, yeah.
My favourite
your
is
favourite.
Tommy Flowers creating Colossus, a man without honour in his own country in the Post Office Research Department suddenly finds his role and creates Colossus out of thousands of little valves and I don't know what, which cracks. You know,
and pays for it himself. Pays for it himself because he can't get it paid for. Can't get the purchase order. I mean, it's incredible.
Eventually, you know, he gets a writ, which means he can have anything he likes.
But that's pretty much like, isn't it, Christopher Clayton Hutton of MI9, the whole escape and evasion lot. He's there funding in the early days some of the Q gadgets, those sort of James Bond gadgets. We're back to Bond again, aren't we? Out of his own money, and then the War Office finally sort of coughs up. But we've got these wonderful British inventors, haven't we, in the margins?
Who invent the Piat, one of your favourite weapons?
Yes, Blacker, and the Blacker Bombard,
Well,
which is also the Hedgehog and all those Spigot weapons. Yeah, which is he's a crazy inventor type.
He is a crazy inventor type.
But then, I mean, it's interesting though, because some people can't get. Flowers, after all, was remunerated after the war, and then shares the money with his team. Doesn't take it for himself. But what's interesting is some people can't get stuff funded, and other people really, really can. And so it's all quite haphazard. And some people get lots of money to make things that are a dead end, and then other people, you know, there's this very peculiar. I mean, you know, defence procurement. We know in this day and age what a chaotic business that is. You know, when they've just delivered Ajax that you can't sit in without going deaf or whatever.
Deaf, yes.
So it is interesting that you do have people coming up with brilliant things who can't get funding, and then other people coming up with useless things who can, and you know, that's wartime too, isn't it? And
things
not
are
unlike
accelerated in wartime.
well, and not unlike what we've seen in the pandemic, where you know people set up a company and get 10 million off the government, or whatever, and then deliver jack all, and then someone else will create a pill that is a retroviral or whatever. You know that in times of crisis the money sluices about, and not necessarily the right people get it, and so on.
But a lot of it during the war was due to getting Churchill's ear.
It was patronage.
Yeah. You know, you got Churchill, and
Lord Charwell's ear. Yeah.
You know, out comes a memo: action this day. Money flows. People are dead scared for their careers, and it happens.
Well, it's like Peter Fleming getting money for the auxiliaries.
Yes.
Who, you know, Ian Fleming's brother, who lived in a house full of explosives because when he was setting up the stay-behinds, he somehow got lots of money for it.
That's a very interesting story. Should we have stay-behinds in Europe? Because we did at one point, of course.
In the Cold War,
In the Cold War, and Daphne Park, who is represented here in this museum.
Glad you've mentioned, because I was going to say as a final point, guys, you've got to mention some of the heroic women and the stuff that the women did, and then just, you know, involvement in military intelligence. So yes, Daphne Park, she's important, isn't she? And she's an Oxfordshire lass. She's
an Oxfordshire lass out of Africa, and at one point she is setting up the Gladio network of stay-behind parties in Europe. Of course, it went sour.
Early Cold War?
Early Cold War.
Yeah.
No, it all went sour because the extreme right took it over.
Yes, there's that grey area after in the decade after the Second World War, where some of the people that what becomes NATO are recruiting, you know,
and they
aren't exactly savoury. I mean,
some of them were bumping people off as well. So we come back to the original question: are we licensed to kill?
I'm going to ask you a final question. I'm going to ask Ingram first, and then you, Al. So yes, dignified. You know, you ask your father first. And it's not really a flippant question, but do you have a favourite spy novel? So getting away from our seriousness now.
A favourite spy book?
Spy book.
Novel. I'm not personally a Bond fan. I much prefer...
Oh, how can you say that? Look where we stood.
Well, it is a terrible confession.
So you won't go and see any more Bond films? No,
I won't.
So what would you read?
I like history. One of the most interesting people, who I would love to know more about, is Marie-Madeleine Fourcade.
Oh yes.
Who was a French journalist. She was very much on the right, and when her boss is arrested, she takes over his intelligence network and runs it throughout the war. The casualty rate is horrendous, but she keeps going, supplying MI6 with the most incredibly valuable information about life in France, she had agents in the U-boat ports and all that sort of thing. Absolutely invaluable. And she's not really revered much in this country, but she was instrumental in providing an incredible amount of humint during the Second World War. And she has, you know, my profound respect of having survived all that. She escaped through the bars of a prison cell. She stripped herself naked and wriggled through the bars, put her dress back on, hopped into a river to escape the dogs that were chasing her, and ended up sleeping in a cornfield. An incredibly tough woman, and a great value to us. So she is my heroine.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. Al, what about you? What's your spy book or your novel?
Moonraker by Ian Fleming.
Why that one?
Well, because the thing about the Bond books is they are not like the films. And I mean, the Casino Royale, the original book, the bit in the movie, the bit that's from the book, is that he's sent to bankrupt this chap, Le Chiffre. In the book, Le Chiffre is a French trade unionist who's in the pay of the Soviet Union, and he's running a sort of reverse Gladio network in France, like a terror network in doing Soviet misdeeds. And so Bond is sent to the casino to bankrupt him, play cards and bankrupt him. That's the bit that's in the book that makes it to the film. There's no Aston Martin, there's no him being poisoned and having to restart his heart. There's no rooftop chases or parkour or any of that. It's this sort of strangely mundane story. But what I love about Moonraker is the story in Moonraker is that Drax, this industrialist, who turns out to be a Nazi who's rebadged himself as a sort of expatriate businessman, a bit like someone like Robert Maxwell, although obviously Robert Maxwell was not a Nazi. I mean, anyway, but the point is he's sort of one of those sort of people. And Bond realises that what Drax has done is he's built a rocket in Surrey somewhere, and in central London has enough uranium or something so that when the rocket lands on central London, it will create critical mass and cause an atomic explosion to destroy central London. Right? That's good. That's good stuff. That right? And the climactic passage of the book is Bond chasing up the A23 from into London, and so it's following someone and on a dark and stormy night, and that's the most exciting bit of the book, and that is weirdly gripping, and it paints a picture of a very different England, and it's very different to James Bond. But I would recommend the middle period Bond books once he's found his feet, because the first one's a couple of really crazy. But yes, I would say A Moonraker by Ian Fleming is my favourite spy book.
Oh, thank you both so much. You know, today we've had some fun moments, we've had a bit of frivolity as well, but with a deeply serious side, isn't it, to this interview?
It's very serious.
And a lot for us to think about and for those watching to think about. So can I say a huge thanks? Father and son, you're legendary, both of you. Ingram and Al, thank you so much for coming today.
Thanks for having me.
This has been a production for the National Centre for Military Intelligence. To find out more and to support the NCMI, please visit ncmi.co.uk.